Finally, the Audient iD14 audio interface review has come to Real Home Recording. So, I've been using this little audio interface for a little over 2 years now. I got it back in February of 2016, so I know a few things about it. And I'm going to tell you guys what I think in this video, so let's get started. The Audient iD14 features two Class A Audient console preamps with balanced Neutrik brand XLR 1/4-inch combo connectors. Each preamp can deliver up to 56 decibels of gain, plus an additional 10 decibels can be added with software. There's also a Class A JFET instrument input. It has Burr-Brown converters. Each input channel has selectable 48-volt phantom power. There's an optical connector for an additional 8 inputs. There's two 1/4-inch balanced line level outputs. There's also a 1/4-inch TRS headphone output. That big silver knob is called the encoder. Pressing it in quickly mutes your outputs. Holding it down temporarily mutes them. Then there's the 8-segment LED display, which shows your output level and volume settings. You can assign different functions to the ID button, scroll control, sum to mono, sum and difference, a negative 15 decibels dim, and talkback. The power supply comes with United States, European Union, United Kingdom, and Australia socket adapters. The iD14 is class compliant, so it can work with mobile devices. And there's also a Kensington lock for added security to prevent theft. You didn't click on this video to watch me talk about features though. You want to hear some audio samples. So, here they are. I did a bunch of them.
The gods of Olympus have abandoned me.
And Kratos cast himself from the highest mountain in all of Greece.
Okay, to make this a fair comparison, I am leaving the gain set to the previous sample that I recorded, which was about 56 decibels. Well, no, wait a minute. Which was about the 4 o'clock to 4:30 position on the preamp. So it's a little bit higher. If you want to read about more ID14 specs, I'll link to the Audient website below. For the rest of this video, it's going to be my opinion on my experience with the ID14 over the past couple of years. I'm going to start with the bad. So first of all, the power supply feels a little cheap, and that may have to do with the adapters that you have to put in it. Actually, right after I put it together, it fell apart, trying to put it into the wall outlet. So I don't really like that. I do like that the cable length is over 6 feet, so that's nice. The line outputs for the speakers felt a little cheap. I don't know if they're using plastic on that or not, but I wish that they would use whatever they're using on the headphone output. Sometimes when I put headphones in, and this happens for more than just one pair, so I think it is the connector, the channels aren't putting out sound, so you just have to wiggle a little bit. And this actually seems to be an issue with a lot of headphone connectors, so I don't know if I can blame Audient on that one or not. Over the period of 2 years, the drivers only failed on me about 4 times, and it was always when I started the computer up. All I had to do was restart the computer and they fixed themselves. Basically what would happen is you can't change the volume for whatever reason. 4 times out of 2 years isn't too shabby, and considering I've had plenty of audio interfaces crash on me when I'm using them, and the ID14 is always plugged in, that's a really good record. The warranty, let's just be honest, really isn't that great. It's 1 year, parts and labor, that's it. So, even though they say it's built to last, well, back it up. Back it up, Audient. I would at least like a 2-year warranty, if not 3. At the very least, give us the option so we can purchase it for, I don't know, maybe 50 bucks. But that's one thing that I almost didn't buy the interface because of the 1-year warranty. The gain knob is top heavy or congested. Those are the technical terms. Basically, it means that when you get to like the 3 o'clock range, so about right here, a little bit past that. I'll do it on the second one too. So when you get to the 3 o'clock range, the rest of the range, you're gradually building up gain. And then right here, there's like a 20 decibel where you got to like really tweak it just a tiny, tiny bit. So yeah, the gain bunching is a little annoying, but I'm used to that because I'm used to preamps that are cheap. So, but these preamps do not sound cheap at all, and I'll get to that later. If you record virtual instruments, be prepared to bounce tracks, because This interface, you really can't throw a lot of CPU at it before it starts crapping out, especially at lower latencies. Now they're going to be releasing new drivers in a month or two. At least that's the plan. So maybe that'll change by then. But for right now, you'll do yourself well to bounce virtual instruments. So that's the bad. Now let me talk about the good. First of all, I love the software. I think the software may be the best part of the interface because I have used several different audio interfaces over the years and I just don't like the way they're laid out. The ID14 control panel reminds me of nice plugins, you know, where all the features you want are right there and all the features that rarely get used are buried in menus. And that's a good thing. So another thing I like is that you can label the tracks. Like that's pretty cool. You can hide tracks that you're not using, specifically the digital inputs. You know, rarely am I hooked up to digital inputs, so I can hide. Otherwise, it would just fill my screen up with inputs. The manual, although you don't get a printed manual, you get a quick start guide, which is like 4 pages long. The manual is awesome. And I'm actually glad that they did it this way because they did update the manual a couple times over the years. So it makes sense, number one, to save money on printing and ink. And number two, if they add features to the software, well, the printed manual will be outdated anyway. Also, Audient didn't include a CD, which again, anytime I get a new piece of hardware, I really just toss the CD to the side anyway and go right to the website and download the drivers because by the time you get the hardware, they usually put out driver updates or firmware updates. And sure enough, the first time the ID14 was put into the computer, you know, and I had the drivers installed, which by the way, they were smooth to install. It immediately said, you know, firmware upgrade is available. I downloaded the firmware. It was really easy to do. And yeah, I only had to contact tech support one time. And for that one time, I will give them a 10 out of 10. They were quick to get back with me and they gave me a detailed response. The issue I was having was ASIO was putting out a lot hotter volume than my main Windows. And basically the suggestion was crank up your Windows output because it's a software output and 100% is what you want to have it at. And so what I do now is the main mix fader is down to about negative 20 decibels. And that gives me good gain staging on the way out. Build quality. This thing, first of all, it looks classy. It looks like a high-end interface, even though it's only $300. And just, it doesn't feel cheap at all. It's a heavy interface. You know, it's made out of basically all metal. Like I said, the only build quality issue I have, let me cover my serial number up, is right here. The line outputs, I think, have like, they're a little loose. The outputs, the ring is a little loose. And I wish that they would use the same quality that they have in the front on the back. And I mean, I can't really tell if it's metal or not, but that's the only thing. And I'm picky. If there was another issue with this, I would say it, but I really like the way this interface feels. I mean, honestly, I don't know how they sold it for $300. Okay, now the noise specs. An interesting thing happened. When I first got the interface, most of the noise was in the low end, and I'm gonna assume that's like DC offset issues. Now, as of late, the issues with noise are in the upper range, in the upper frequencies, and I'm gonna run some more tests, which I'll put on screen right now, and if anything changes, I'll let you guys know. But I thought that was interesting, and of course, higher frequency noise is more audible than stuff that you can do a high pass filter with and get rid of. One thing that you should be aware of is the Audient iD14 only has plus 12 dBu of headroom, meaning you should keep your maximum peaks to negative 12 decibels full scale. As I said earlier, I really like the software and I really like that I can control the volume for either the speakers or headphones right from the software. Okay, now preamp quality wise, I love it. Now, if you guys know me, if you've been subscribed to the channel for a while, you know that years ago I said preamp quality really doesn't matter. And I ended up eating my own words on that. And that's because apparently, according to Glenn Fricker of Spectre Sound Studios,
the Audient mic preamps are more than capable, and honestly, they remind me quite a bit of my much more expensive API 512Cs.
somebody else on a Sweetwater review said that they sound like Focusrite ISA preamps. Look, whatever the case is, I can tell you that, number one, the preamps sound detailed, so they work really well on drums because of transient detail. I also really like them on acoustic guitar, but the bottom line is, it makes mixing a lot easier and your final mix will sound better using this interface. And I know that a lot of people switch from the Focusrite, the Scarlett series to the ID14 or the ID22. I haven't really seen a lot of people switching from the Audient to the Focusrites. Converter wise, well, I have to read this, otherwise I'll get the numbers wrong. So the interface has chips that before it was released were out of the price range for something costing $300. They use the Burr Brown PCM 4202 for the analog to digital converter and Burr Brown PCM 4104 for the digital to analog converter. Just to give you an idea of the quality that we're talking about, the 4202 is found on the Mytek Stereo 96 ADC version 6 and the Mytek 8x192 ADC. And some interfaces that use the DAC are the RME Fireface UFX, the RME Babyface, the PreSonus Fire Studio Mobile Source, and the Allen & Heath ZR16. It's not just the converter chip that matters, but the fact that Audient, they said that they went through and they were aiming for a certain budget range, and they ensured that the components that they put in their board, in their interface, are good, and I don't have any reason to doubt that. Again, the whole circuit matters, not just the chip, but we're talking, they have their preamps going into these USB powered. That's one thing I didn't talk about yet. The fact that all I need is to plug into my USB port in order to make this work, as long as I'm not using phantom power required microphones, that's awesome. Really, really awesome. And also, now this is something I didn't really look into, so I don't know how factual it is, but they were saying that they could have put phantom power in, but it would have starved the inputs. So I don't know what effect that would have on microphone quality, but I can tell you that I'm glad that they didn't cut corners on that. All right, I'm just going to read this because it's notes that I wrote. I installed the interface as my main sound card on Saturday, February 20th, 2016. I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but I did notice a quality difference. Not night and day, but it sounds like there is more low-end detail and the high-end is smoother. The sound also appears to not sound stuck to the speakers, and therefore the phantom center and areas in between sound more three-dimensional. Again, I don't know if this is a placebo effect or not, but I started noticing subtle acoustic reflections more often. More importantly though, I can turn my speaker volume knob all the way up and there isn't any noise, unlike my built-in sound card. So I actually answered that question myself, whether it was placebo or not. At one point I did have to use my internal sound card again because I had the ID14 over somebody's house, and yes, there is a difference. Now, is that fair? It's not really fair because we're talking about like probably a $20 sound card, but hey, DACs do matter. Absolutely. I am a believer now. One thing I would have liked is for some kind of marker. Now there's a marker on the top of the knob, but there's no marker down here. There's a hole on the opposite side, but I wish that they had an indentation or a mark closer to where, closer to where the actual gain is, not up here. It's not that big of a deal, but again, I had to be nitpicky because There's so many good things about this interface. Speaking of good things, the headphone output has tons of clean gain. You know, a lot of interfaces, there's not enough volume, so you can't record drums with them. You have to buy an external headphone amplifier. Not with this one. I can record drums with drummer headphones perfectly fine. Plus, I still had some volume to give it if I really needed it to be louder. I've used a lot of different headphone models with this, and they all sound good. And that's really one thing I love about it, because I was gonna buy a USB DAC just for listening with headphones, and once I got the ID14, I no longer needed to do that. So that was pretty cool. Now, one thing that's annoying is that the volume will reset when you turn your computer off. Now, I don't know if there's a difference if you have it plugged into the wall, if it keeps the settings that way or not, but if it's only being powered by USB, the volume settings will change. Now, you can save a preset, and that should fix that, but it's just something, you know, a little nitpick. I did some latency test, and here's the figures I got. Using Centrance Latency Test Utility version 3.7. At 44.1 kilohertz and 64 samples, there was 8 milliseconds of delay. 48 kilohertz at 64 samples, 7 milliseconds of delay. 88.2 kilohertz, I could not test that for some reason. And finally, 96 kilohertz at 128 samples, we got 6 milliseconds of delay. Now, when Audient releases the new drivers, I will test this again and let you guys know how the lower buffer settings do and if they're stable on my computer or not. One of my concerns was that the line inputs go through the microphone preamps. So one of the first tests I did was to run my CD player into the line inputs, and then I also did the speaker output into the line inputs and recorded that, and the results were really good. In fact, I have no problem if I really had to use an external mic preamp and then go into these, because although the tone sounds slightly bright, the rest of the frequency spectrum is maintained. And one that I was really concerned about was at the low end, but again, no issues there, no issues with the sound stage being reduced or anything like that. And in fact, if you guys remember, I did a video where I wanted to test how many times I could send the output into the input before there was noticeable quality differences. I did 4 passes that I couldn't really hear a quality difference. So I think that's pretty impressive. All right, I'll just put it this way. Right now, as of March 2018, this is the best audio interface you can buy under $300, period. And it really does punch upwards. It's better than some interfaces that cost more. I'm not going to say it's better or worse than some, because I only have experience with a very few amount of audio interfaces. But I can say that, again, this took my recordings to the next level. I always struggled with tracks. You know, I have to cut a lot of tracks here and there. Again, my drums just didn't punch like I thought they should. Acoustic guitars, I always had to just add way too much high shelf. Now, I still have to do this when I'm mixing, but I have to do it a lot less. And just, look, it's a buzzword or whatever, but this interface truly was a game changer when it was first released back in 2015. And, you know, Audient's sticking with it. That's one thing I can really say, is that they're going to be releasing driver updates for the ID14 and ID22. They're not forgetting about this, even though the interface is turning 3 years old. And the ID22, I think, is turning like 4 or 5 years old. They didn't forget about their old customers. So a lot of credit goes to them. And speaking of which, this is one thing I was going to give them negative remarks on, and that was there's no included software. You know, all the other interfaces out there, it comes with software so you can start recording and mixing. Well, last year that changed with their ARC program, where it's called like the ARC Creative Suite or something like that. And it comes with Cubase, LE, Cubasis LE, and 2 plugins from Eventide, 10 Lander mastering sessions or mixes or whatever, and then there's one other thing, I forget the name of the website, but they give you basically tutorials for, I think it's 2 free tutorials and then a $20 voucher. So that's really good stuff. And I have to praise Audient for not forgetting their old customers. They've really made a competitive product here, and really there's not much else I can say other than it just keeps getting better. And that's pretty darn amazing. So because it's an all metal construction, you can actually get electric shock, static electric shock, from touching the knobs or from touching the rest of the interface. So be on the lookout for that during the winter months. So in conclusion, again, I have a lot of praise for the ID14, and I want you guys to right now, if you're considering buying this interface, to go in the description, check out the companion videos that I've been making over the years about the ID14, listen to how it sounds versus the competition, and just download the raw files, because you got to hear what it sounds like before you buy it, because it's not like software. You can't just try it for 14 days. Well, I guess you could. I guess you could buy it and then return it if you don't like it. So I don't think you'll return it though. I really don't. So again, this is not a sponsored video. I bought this interface with my own money, and I recommend it really to everybody, especially if your budget's really tight. If you can only afford a $100 interface, I recommend saving up, because you will not regret buying the ID14, or get like a no interest Sweetwater thing or Amazon thing or whatever and buy it that way. And I mean, I just don't see this interface, as long as it doesn't break, is going to last for a long time. It's going to be hard to beat this interface. And that's about all I have to say. This has been Adam for RealHomeRecording.com.